Thank you so much, Your Excellency. I would like to welcome back on stage our PS, PS Singoe, to come and formally welcome our chief guest this evening.
Without further ado, let's put our hands together for the dynamic, visionary leader of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, His Excellency Dr. Wamkele Mene. Please.
Your Excellency, Prime Cabinet Secretary Mudavadi, Principal Secretary, it is really a pleasure to be with you tonight. I had the opportunity to visit Real Sources in Nairobi a few weeks ago, and in the room, the company comprises people who are all younger than me. And I am not an old person. But what that demonstrated to me is the future of our continent, as well as the intersection between trade agreements and the future. So this agreement, this AFCFTA, is not necessarily about the past, where our continent comes from, in fact, the fragmentation, the divisions, the 55 visas, the cost of transport and logistics, matters that continue to constrain our continent. In my opinion, we have within our reach the tool, the instrument to tackle these challenges. In a few days' time, our heads of states will adopt the remaining legal instruments that comprise the agreement establishing the AFCFTA. The annexes, as the lawyers call them, the annexes on intellectual property rights. When our heads of states do that, that will mark a very significant milestone of conclusion of all of the legal instruments that the heads of states directed that we negotiate to create a commercially viable single market. This will be the first time since the establishment of the WTO in 1994 in Marrakesh that 50 countries have come together to agree on rules for common market, for investment, for industrial development, and most importantly, in the two protocols that all of us as Africans should be particularly proud of, the protocol on women and youth in trade and the protocol on digital trade. As the world is moving ever closer to the precipice of fragmentation, supply chain disruptions, increased trade protectionism, increased investment protectionism, increased industrial development protectionism, our continent is moving the opposite direction. We're liberalizing intra-Africa trade. We're liberalizing intra-Africa investment. We have a protocol on women and youth in trade, which asserts that our continent must move beyond aspirations for young people and women to be at the fore of Africa's economy, that our continent must codify these aspirations into legally binding obligations, which has been done through the protocol on women and youth in trade. Second, the protocol on digital trade, on which the launch today should be the bedrock is too a forward-looking instrument that demonstrates the capacity of our continent to seize the opportunity of the digital economy. It is, of course, very apt that the government of Kenya, Equity Bank, and Real Sources are at the fore of this cutting-edge intersection between commercial diplomacy, digitization, and trade, because M-Pesa was born in Kenya. So we expect nothing less from Kenya than leadership in digital innovation. As I mentioned, the protocol on digital trade will provide a very strong basis for this technological innovation that is being launched today. The protocol is a framework that significantly reduces intra-Africa barriers to digital trade, establishes a regulatory environment for the digital economy, and has elements that resonate with SMEs, with informal traders, smallholder farmers, such as, for example, establishing a continental platform for payments. We now have a platform for interoperability of payments across the continent. It also, that is to say, the protocol enables the movement of data across our economies, enabling young people in particular, to take advantage of commercial opportunities that the digital economy presents, such as data centers. Young Africans are at the cutting edge of digital innovation. And the data centers that all of us require by 2035 to power our AI transition, that innovation will have to be driven by young people. And again, here, Kenya is taking the lead, having one of the largest number of data centers in Africa, enabling young people to take advantage of the digital economy. And so governments across our continent, diplomatic missions, we would call on them to look at this innovation and this model that is being introduced today as an opportunity for the entire continent, the private sector, SMEs, young entrepreneurs, to accelerate, to introduce models, tools, innovations that will accelerate intra-Africa trade, which the Principal Secretary reminded us remains very, very low. We have a number of challenges. We have overcome the challenge of lack of a regulatory framework. As I mentioned, in a few days' time, our heads of states will adopt the last remaining instruments that should enable intra-Africa trade to take off. However, the challenge is not in the negotiating room. The challenge will be in enabling our SMEs, our informal market of 1.4 billion people with a combined GDP of United States dollars. Challenge is Kenya is taking the lead, allowing all Africans to travel to Kenya visa-free. Kenya, Rwanda, Nigeria, and Ghana are some of the countries that have taken the lead to tackle this challenge. Tackle of persons, particularly business persons, constraints the growth of our continent. We also have a significant challenge. The cost of transport and logistics is high. The cost of infrastructure, which African Development Bank estimates to be over $150 billion annually. That too is a constraint to intra-Africa trade, doubling by the year 2035. However, even with these challenges, even with the challenges that I've just mentioned, I believe that with the AFCFTA, as Prime Cabinet Secretary said, this is the only opportunity that our continent has, establishing a common market, enabling trade and young people to be at the fore of the future of our continent. The rules that have been adopted, they present to the market precisely the opposite of what the global economy, the fracture of the global economy is presenting to investors. Predictability, certainty of markets, and a rules-based system for enabling the private sector to resolve its disputes where they may arise in a commercial or trade context. And so, in this world, the fragmentation that we see, the disrupted supply chains globally, the fact that all African countries have been removed from AGOA, rendering them uncompetitive in that particular market, all of these factors combined should compel all of us as Africans to reflect quite deeply on where else is our market if it is not here on the continent. And so what Real Sources is saying, all in Africa, it tells me that we have no alternative. We have no alternative to succeed, and we do not have an alternative market as a continent. So we have to build a very, very strong domestic market that shall enable all of this production that is taking place across our continent to continue to drive and power the growth of our continent. By the year 2050, by the turn of the century, the youngest working force will be here on our continent. 1 in 4 people will be here. So we must position our continent to respond to that challenge of young people having opportunities. And so I wish to end on the note on which I started. And that is, when I went to Real Sources, I saw nothing but young people hungry for opportunities. We must be able to look back from 2050 that we delivered on that promise. And so this trade agreement that our heads of states are leading must deliver that promise and must be an instrument for delivery of that promise for the young people of our continent. And so I want to thank you very much, Philip, Dr. Mwangi, Prime Cabinet Secretary, for the partnership and this innovation that you are launching today, which I believe is a model for how we should take advantage of Africa's digital economy, leveraging on our commercial diplomacy, and bringing on board millions and millions of young Africans into the digital economy, so that, as Dr. Mwangi said, it is not about who's opening the door. It is rather about you being able to seize the opportunities that that door that is open presents to you. So I want to thank you very much, and I wish all of us very good luck with this initiative. Thank you.
Let's appreciate His Excellency Mamphele one more time. Thank you, Your Excellency. Your presence here, of course, really does speak to the commitment of the AFCFTA Secretariat to actually walk the talk. So thank you so much for being here with us this evening. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to now invite the architect of the platform that we're here to launch. Mr. Felix Chege is the founder and Chief Executive Officer of Real Sources Africa. Please sit. He's an entrepreneur and a technologist who refuses to accept that African problems cannot find African solutions. His founding observation was simple. African cannot find each other, cannot verify each other, and most unfortunately cannot trust each other. So he built a platform that does all three. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together for Felix Chege, who will also
Good afternoon, everyone. It's actually evening. Honor and pleasure to have all of you in this particular room. As His Excellency, the Secretary General just said, he came to my office and found young people in the office. And it's true. I'm actually the oldest person in that particular. But I'm only 2 years older than you. So basically, I'd say you're still young at heart. Real Sources Africa started off as a passion or as a dream. Trying to see how best can we connect this continent. We started off the journey in 20. Today I decided I will not do quite a number of presentations, but I'd like to talk and explain to you how we got where we are today. This is a market. This is how our SMEs transact. This is where millions and millions of our young entrepreneurs are. This is where they buy. This is where we looked at how can we empower these particular SMEs to be able to export products in any other African country. Statistics, without the hassle of compliance, aggregation, and consolidation. In 2024, towards the end, we came up with an initiative by the name Trade Connect. Our main goal with Trade Connect was trying to see how best can we export 1,000 containers over a period of 12 months. I feel 2025, we had already aggregated and shipped a total of 350 containers to different countries. Was the lessons we picked. One of the main lessons we picked was that there was a big challenge in demand intake. And the big gap was most Africans or most SMEs did not produce, or they produced to go to an export. But they didn't start by asking themselves, are we producing products that are actually with a whole container load of fresh milk, cooking oil, and we also went with powdered milk. Interestingly, we had not asked ourselves very basic questions. The demand in that particular market is not for fresh milk, but is for powdered milk. But now we had some container load related to, and the amount of frustration that we got there would end up leading us to almost not going back to that market because of the losses that we didn't cut. But the second main challenge was deal assurance. The credibility of or the confidence that was required to give an SME the ability to pay, sit down and wait for their products to be delivered, but at the same time, give the confidence for the factor that I'll ship and trust that I'm going to get paid upon goods being delivered. But at the same time, there is another big challenge, execution, in that we have a lot of people who understand or can talk about trade, but have very few people who can actually execute a transaction. But more importantly, we realized that there was a big gap in sustainable market presence. And give a perfect example. At the moment in my country, we have a lot of China squares that have come up. China squares are a bad model. But we need to ask ourselves a very basic question. We've come into our markets with a retail and a wholesale and more e-commerce infrastructure. And we ask ourselves a very basic question. If you walk into a retail store and you find 5 brands of a Chinese brand, and you really want to buy that particular product, does it mean you'll walk out empty-handed, or does it mean you'll collect what you find or what you found on the shelves? It's a no-brainer. You'll still walk out with what you found in those particular shelves. To bridge this gap, we did approach the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Yeah. These, for the longest time, have been our centers of trust. We realized that any moment a trader crossed the border to try and seek a market, or trying to seek or sourcing any kind of product, the first point they went to was an embassy. Let's ask ourselves why. Why go to an embassy? My hypothesis is because you trust the embassy to be the source of truth. We went to this particular embassy. We found something that looks like this. We realized that our embassies collect a lot of inquiries. Kenya is endowed with an average of 70 missions. 70 missions, which most of them have a trade officer. The main role of this trade officer is to create demand for Kenyan brands. But now, this is how the office looks like. And what you can see, these are basic inquiries that they've captured, but they have one bottleneck. They are not able to transmit these inquiries to the actual entities that require to respond back to these inquiries. Obviously, we collect 3,500 inquiries in a month. Our closure rate before was less than 1%. But why is the case? It's because if I'm a trade officer and you give me 3,500 inquiries, the first question I ask myself, where do I start? Now, when I talk about inter-Africa trade, sometimes people think only about commodities. But there's a bigger play to this. There are services. There is investment. There is financing. There is labor. But most importantly, there's a diplomatic we call government relations. And we started a journey of trying to see how can we support our embassies, capture these inquiries digitally, validate these inquiries, but most importantly, support execution, but at the same time, create one gold mine called data. So that if I'm receiving 1,000 inquiries of coffee from Ethiopia, then it means that our policy work needs to target coffee because there is actual demand. But most importantly, the same structure will support us when we are building our SMEs, because we're telling our SMEs, invest in coffee because I got you. the biashara link portal was set up. In mid of 2025, we signed a partnership agreement with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And the goal was very clear: automate or digitize, but also track. The features that the biashara link portal brings on board are simple but unique. One, inquiry management. Capabilities to be able to track that inquiry all the way to execution. The second capability, ability to book your appointments or book your meetings with a trade officer or an ambassador at the comfort of your home. Sometimes, friends, back when I wanted to talk to a trade officer or an ambassador, I'd be busy going around all the ministry offices